Welcome back to Wichita's Biz That Is. I'm Tim Witzman, president of the Wichita Independent Business Association, and our guest today, Ben Nelson from the city and the Public Works Department. Okay, we've talked about kind of the context and other things that are going on. What options do we have now?
We're down to two final options for adding new water supplies. One of them are enhancements to what's known as ASR, the Aquifer Storage and Recovery Project. We had constructed the second of 4 phases.
I'm going to interrupt you.
Okay.
Do we have evidence as to whether that's working or not?
Yeah, it's working. In fact, we had the aquifer storage facilities running water from the treatment plant and putting it down into the aquifer as late as last week. So it really is dependent on when rain falls and water's up in the river, because what it does is it takes water that's above the base amount in the Little Arkansas River up by Sedgwick, treats it, puts it underground in the aquifer. We can pull it out and use it later when we're in a drought, for example. So it's working. It started up last year, and what we'd be able to do, one of the 2 options for adding new water sources, to build basically a small reservoir on the ASR site, because right now the treatment plant that we have can only take in 30 million gallons a day, which is a pretty good amount. But on the other hand, when we have flooding events in the river, we could pump quite a bit more out of that, but if it has nowhere to go, there's nowhere to put it. So we would create some storage capacity next to the treatment plant, pull some water into that reservoir, and then once the river levels go down and there isn't water directly from the river into the treatment plant, we would then divert the water from that storage pool into the treatment plant, and basically probably increase the amount of water that we'd be able to get out of it by as much as 10 million gallons a day when you look at how much would be pumped out over the course of a year.
All right, sounds like a good idea.
Second option is to buy water from El Dorado Lake. Earlier you had asked whether there were kind of the status of water sources here in Kansas. El Dorado Lake is a water source that's been there since the 70s and has been fairly underutilized. City of El Dorado takes a little bit less than half of the amount of the water that could be taken out of that reservoir each year and have it still be sustainable. So our second option is to purchase water from El Dorado. They would treat it out at El Dorado and pipe in treated water directly into the northeast part of the city in the distribution system, so customers could use it at that point.
All of this gets into issues of cost. I mean, there are other things you could do. You could try to have a huge pipe coming down from the north, but that's terribly expensive. Do you have any numbers at hand? I should have asked you this before we started, on kind of comparing our water rates with the Oklahoma cities, the Colorado Springs, Des Moines, Omaha, kind of comparable places?
Yeah, it's interesting. At City Council workshop a few weeks ago, we had the head of the Wichita Economic Group come and talk about, and she showed he showed a really interesting slide of how we compared to different cities coming out of the recession in terms of job growth. We also looked at how we compared to those cities with our water and sewer rates, and we're quite a bit lower than the average. And what's interesting even beyond that is we look at also the top 50 largest cities across the country, and our rates are generally, our water rates in particular, are generally quite a bit lower than the average. We rank residential customers about 5th lowest or 8th lowest of the top 50 cities.
Okay.
Large industrial businesses as well are about 4th, 5th lowest in the country as well.
Well, I'm not going to lay this on you, Ben, as sort of having to answer for the entire city. But one of the difficulties is we're now discovering that a great deal of infrastructure hasn't been handled. We have GWDC wanting money for economic development. We have this need. And I think it's going to be a challenge to get the community to understand. They probably understand that water's going to become more expensive. I don't think that's a difficulty. But there's something, the bad thing, I used to tell people, always admit when you're wrong, because if it piles up, people get really mad at you. You know,
Sure.
Tell them the first time you make a mistake, and they'll go, okay, fine. But we're going to have an awful lot. Any understanding at all of how we got to a situation where we have this many things we have to deal with?
We've deferred maintenance on assets for a long time. And that goes for a whole range of different things, from public facilities to streets, to not investing as much in our water and sewer lines as we should, the pipes that run water to different properties and whatnot. So we're at a point where we've estimated how much some of these needs cost, and they really are some surprising numbers for folks to see. And I think the longer that we go or have gone with deferring maintenance on those assets, the more and more the cost piles up. And in a way, it actually it snowballs. It gets so much worse the longer we go with asset
well, it's like
maintenance
Social
getting
Security.
deferred. Yes.
I mean, if you tackle the stupid thing, you make little tiny differences, and it's done.
Yeah.
If you wait 20 years, it's going to be murder.
And we've tried to do some of that the past couple of years on a smaller level than water supply in terms of the water and sewer systems. We had chronically underfunded for a number of years the amount of money we were putting into rehabbing and replacing existing water and sewer mains. Obviously, they're in the ground now. They serve people who use it. We're going to have to replace them and rehab them at some point. We hadn't been putting nearly the money into it that we probably should have. So actually, the water and sewer rate increases people have experienced the past few years, a large chunk of that has gone to increasing by 200 and 300% the amount of investment we're making in the system. So we've made gains in those areas. We've been changing out water meters so that we have a current system of those, but now we're moving on to water supply and some other assets as well.
If we were to finance this strictly with the user fee, with what we pay for
water
water
rates.
and sewer, how much would that have to go up to really meet the need to provide a decent water supply?
It really depends on which option we choose. El Dorado, we're still finalizing some of the numbers with El Dorado, one of the main ones being what the purchase price of water would be.
Right.
With Aquifer Storage Project, we wouldn't have to buy any of the water. But in general, they would go up probably 15 to 20%, depending on how it was financed. Maybe a little bit more. We're still finalizing the cost, but it would be a substantial
It's a hit for some
impact.
people, but that's not horrible if it would ensure a water supply.
And that's for El Dorado. Same with Aquifer Storage Project potentially as well. So it could be more, it could be a little less. In fact, we had some information we shared with the City Council at a workshop on April 8th where we had some specific rate impacts, and those are included in a council workshop presentation on the city's website.
When's the city supposed to make any kind of a decision?
May 27th, the City Council is going to have a workshop to talk through a lot of the different strategic issues. You had mentioned a lot of the deferred maintenance and asset needs, and we'll talk through some of that as part of their strategic planning process, May 27th at a workshop. I believe it starts 9:30
But that's
in the
not
morning.
a decision point.
That is not, it's not a decision.
Is there a defined decision point, or is this just ongoing?
I believe we're really hoping to make progress on decisions and moving forward with some of these things in summer at some point.
What kind of reaction are you getting out of the council?
The council's been interested in finding out and learning more about some of these things and helping us as staff drill down. For example, on the water stuff, really helping us know how big a priority it is. We didn't talk about water conservation, but conservation is a big part of our long-term water needs, and that's something they've helped us figure out what program we want to move forward with, and it'll be something we present to them soon. Also helping with rate impact, showing what the customer impact would be of these different things. So I think the farther along we get in working with them on these things, I think hopefully the closer we get to making some good decisions.
All right, we'll finish this session and hope we get some rain.
Yes, we've been awfully dry this year.
Thanks for being with us, Ben
Tim,
Nelson.
thank you very much.
Appreciate it. And we'll be back next week with another Wichita's Biz That Is.